It wasn't just a stage, it was a test, the kind of moment that doesn't announce itself as history while it's happening, but later people swear they felt it in their chest before the words were even spoken. The lights inside the Washington conference hall were bright enough to make the stage gleam like polished glass. Not harsh, not theatrical, just clean, deliberate illumination, the kind used when every expression matters. Rows of cameras lined the back wall, lenses stacked like watchful eyes. Every seat was filled, politicians in tailored suits, journalists gripping notebooks a little tighter than usual, entrepreneurs, donors, strategists, people who understood power not as an idea, but as a living thing. They were all waiting for one thing, a rare, highly anticipated discussion between two names that carried weight in completely different ways, Ivanka Trump and Barack Obama. The banners hanging above the stage read, "Building the Future, Leadership and Unity in Modern America." It sounded harmless, optimistic even, but no one in that room truly believed the night would stay that way. There was a strange energy in the air, polite smiles stretched just a second too long, nervous laughter that came and went without warning, that quiet hum that only exists right before something important happens, the kind of silence that feels heavy, like the room itself is holding its breath. Barack Obama and Ivanka Trump had never shared a stage like this before, not face to face, not in real time. That fact alone had pulled millions of eyes toward this event. Cable networks teased it for days, social media buzzed with predictions. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. Would this be civil or combustible? As the host stepped forward and adjusted the microphone, the crowd leaned in instinctively. "Tonight," he said, voice measured, "we talk about what leadership means in an era of division and change." The applause was polite, controlled, almost restrained. People weren't here to clap for slogans. They were saving their energy for what came next. Then the host gestured toward the side of the stage. Ivanka Trump emerged first, elegant, composed, confident in a way that had been practiced under brighter lights than these. The stage lights caught her hair just right as she smiled, a smile refined by years of public scrutiny. She waved softly, acknowledging the room without soaking in it, and took her seat with effortless poise, crossing her legs and resting her hands neatly in her lap. Moments later, Barack Obama stepped out. No rush, no theatrics, just that familiar, unhurried walk. The applause this time was louder, not explosive, but deeply respectful, the kind of applause that says, "We know who you are." He offered that half-smile people had come to recognize over the years, the one that seemed to carry both humor and patience at the same time. They met at center stage, a handshake, firm, measured, just long enough to matter. Cameras flashed, not wildly, precisely. For a brief moment, everything looked peaceful. Two public figures exchanging polite words. Two smiles that revealed nothing. Then they turned and took their seats on opposite sides of the stage, the physical distance between them subtle, but noticeable. The moderator began with safe ground, leadership styles, the pressures of public life, what it means to inspire in a fractured country. Obama spoke about empathy, about patience, about listening before reacting. Ivanka spoke about innovation, about courage, about pushing boundaries. Heads nodded throughout the audience, pens moved. It all sounded professional, expected, almost scripted. But then, slowly, the tone began to shift. Obama leaned slightly forward, his voice steady but thoughtful as he spoke about truth, not as a slogan, but as a foundation. He talked about how every great nation is built on it, how trust collapses without it, and how America's greatest challenge right now wasn't just economic or political, it was believing in what's real. The applause that followed was soft, reflective. Ivanka didn't move. She sat still, eyes forward, listening. Then she leaned in. The microphone picked up her breath before her words. "Mr. Obama," she said, tone sharp but controlled, "how can you talk about truth when there are still questions about where you were even born?" The room froze, not a cough, not a shuffle, not a whisper. It wasn't just unexpected, it was surgical. A question pulled from the past and dropped directly onto a live stage. Not about leadership, not about unity, personal, calculated, cold. It hit the room like a sudden drop in temperature. Obama didn't react right away, not out of fear, but out of surprise. His expression barely changed, but something in the air shifted instantly. You could feel it ripple outward. Gasps came from different corners of the room. Eyes widened. A few people exchanged looks that said the same thing. Did she really just go there? That rumor, the birth certificate lie, had been debunked years ago, buried, documented, exhausted. And yet, there it was again, brought back on live television. The moderator's smile vanished. Even the stage lights seemed to hum louder. Obama sat with his hands folded, eyes steady on Ivanka. She looked calm, almost proud, as if daring the moment to push back. The silence stretched, long enough to become uncomfortable. Then Obama shifted slightly and adjusted his microphone. He let out a soft chuckle, not amused, not mocking, just disbelief. And in that instant, everyone in the room knew something significant was about to happen. Before his response could land, before the tension could snap, before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel, because moments like this don't just happen on a stage, they echo far beyond it. Obama's voice came out quiet, but firm. Ivanka, he said, that story's been around for a long time, and it's been proven wrong for a long time too. He paused, not for effect, but for weight. But maybe the real question isn't where I was born, he continued. Maybe it's why people keep needing to believe something that isn't true. The room stirred. A few hands came together in tentative applause. Others stayed frozen, watching. Obama wasn't angry. He was precise. He looked around the hall, then back at Ivanka. "We're here to talk about the country's future," he said calmly, "not to dig up old lies from the past." Ivanka crossed her arms slowly. Her expression didn't crack, but the energy around her did. The room had changed. Everyone could feel it. The polite discussion was gone. Something sharper had taken its place. And this was only the beginning. The silence that followed Obama's words didn't break. It settled. Not the awkward kind that begs for someone to speak, but the heavy kind that commands attention, the kind that tells everyone in the room that something important is unfolding, whether they're ready for it or not. Ivanka Trump sat upright, shoulders squared, chin slightly lifted. To anyone watching casually, she still looked composed, but the room was full of people trained to read power, posture, and pressure. They noticed the small things. The way her fingers tightened together, the way her smile didn't quite return to her eyes. Across from her, Barack Obama leaned back just slightly, not retreating, not advancing, anchoring himself. It was a posture he had used many times before, one that signaled patience rather than surrender. The moderator cleared his throat, attempting to regain control of the evening. "Well," he said with a nervous chuckle, "that certainly brings us back to the topic of transparency in leadership." A few polite laughs rippled through the crowd, but they didn't last. No one was interested in easing the tension. Everyone wanted to see whether Ivanka would respond or retreat. She chose neither. Instead, Ivanka Trump leaned forward again, reclaiming the microphone with deliberate calm. "I didn't mean to offend," she said, her voice smooth, almost gentle. "But leadership does require transparency. Don't the people deserve to know who their leaders really are?" It was a careful pivot, a step back without admitting misstep, framed not as accusation, but principle, the audience murmured. Some nodded, others shifted uncomfortably. Obama listened without interruption, no headshake, no smile, just stillness. Then he nodded once. "You're absolutely right," he said. "Transparency does matter." The crowd leaned in again. "Which is exactly why," he continued, "I made sure the entire country saw my birth certificate years ago. Clear, verified, public." He paused. "But even after the facts were out, the lie kept spreading." His eyes lifted, scanning the audience slowly, deliberately. "Do you know why?" Silence. "Because sometimes," he said, "it's easier to believe a lie that fits your story than a truth that challenges it." The reaction was immediate. A sharp inhale from the front row, a ripple of applause that grew before anyone quite realized they were clapping. This wasn't cheering, it was recognition. Ivanka didn't clap. Her jaw tightened just enough for the cameras to catch it. She waited for the sound to die down before responding. "I'm not here to talk about the past," she said firmly. "I'm here to talk about leadership, and maybe the kind of leadership people are tired of seeing." It was a bold line, carefully sharpened. Obama leaned forward now, elbows resting lightly on his knees. "Leadership?" he repeated, almost thoughtfully. He smiled faintly. "I agree. People are tired." A pause. "They're tired of drama. They're tired of finger-pointing, and they're tired of confusing attention with impact." A low hum moved through the room. Approval without applause. Ivanka blinked just once. Obama continued, voice steady, unhurried. "When your father questioned my birthplace," he said, "I understood exactly what was happening. It wasn't about truth, it was about headlines." He glanced away briefly, as if recalling something distant, then looked back at her. "And it worked. For a while?" The room stayed silent. No one dared interrupt. "But Ivanka," he said, tone softening, "this isn't about your father, it's about you." That line landed differently. "You asked a personal question," he continued. "So let me answer with something personal." He sat a little straighter. "I didn't get here because of a rumor. I got here because the truth was strong enough to stand on its own." The applause this time was louder, longer, less restrained. Ivanka smiled, but it was tight now, polite, controlled. The confidence was still there, but the ease had slipped. The moderator tried again to redirect. Perhaps we can bring this back to leadership strategies. But Ivanka wasn't ready to let go. With all due respect, Mr. President, she said, voice firmer now. Sometimes people just want straight answers. You talk about truth, but there's a difference between truth and politics. The room went quiet again. Obama studied her for a moment, then his smile widened. Not with amusement, but with clarity. You're absolutely right, he said, and that's why I'm still here to give straight answers. He paused. The truth, he added, doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stay consistent. This time the applause came with conviction. A few people stood, others clapped slowly, deliberately. Ivanka crossed her arms. For the first time all evening, frustration flickered openly across her face. Obama leaned back again, the tension shifting entirely onto the other side of the stage. He hadn't raised his voice, he hadn't attacked, and yet he had taken control of the room. Then he went somewhere unexpected. I know what it feels like to be misunderstood, he said quietly. When your father questioned me, it wasn't just politics. It hurt my family. It made people question something that never should have been questioned. His tone wasn't accusatory, it was reflective. But I learned something from it. He looked at Ivanka directly. Every time someone tried to pull me down with a lie, I used the truth to stand taller. The line didn't explode, it resonated. That, he said, is what leadership is. Not fighting fire with fire, but fighting it with light. The applause that followed was thunderous. People weren't reacting to a clever comeback anymore. They were reacting to composure, to restraint, to the feeling that they were watching someone who knew exactly where he stood and didn't need noise to prove it. Ivanka sat quietly now, hands folded. She nodded once, politely. The moment, unmistakably, belonged to him. The moderator smiled awkwardly, trying once more to regain footing. Thank you both, he said quickly. That was quite an exchange. But no one was ready to move on. They had just watched something rare, a challenge turned into a lesson. And though the stage lights stayed the same, the atmosphere had shifted completely. This was no longer a polite discussion. It was a reckoning, still calm, still measured, but undeniably real. The applause eventually faded, but the tension didn't. It lingered in the air, thick and electric, the kind that presses against the chest without making a sound. The hall felt smaller now, as if the walls themselves had leaned inward to listen more closely. Ivanka Trump sat perfectly still. Her posture remained flawless, but the ease that had defined her entrance was gone. This wasn't the environment she had anticipated. She had expected resistance, maybe even defensiveness. What she hadn't expected was calm. Across from her, Barack Obama hadn't spoken in several seconds. He didn't rush to fill the space. He let the silence stretch, letting it do the work for him. It was a technique he'd used many times before, not as intimidation, but as control. The moderator shifted in his chair, glancing between them. His cue card suddenly looked useless. No prepared question could steer this moment anymore. And then Obama spoke, softly. Ivanka, he said, his voice low but clear, you asked me a question about truth, he paused. Let me ask you one. That alone was enough to reset the room. Obama leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. Not aggressively, intentionally. The crowd hushed instantly. You could hear the faint hum of the lighting rig overhead. Who, he asked calmly, is Baron's mother? It was only 7 words, but they landed like thunder. The effect was immediate. Ivanka froze, not dramatically, not visibly, just a fraction too long before she blinked. Her eyes widened ever so slightly, as if her brain needed an extra second to process what had just been said. The audience inhaled as one. Cameras zoomed in. Reporters' fingers hovered over keyboards. No one had expected that, not the moderator, not the audience, and certainly not Ivanka. She laughed lightly, forcing a smile that didn't quite hold. Excuse me, she said. That's not relevant. Obama didn't blink. Maybe not, he replied evenly, but it's a question. A murmur rolled through the hall. You wanted transparency, he continued, so let's be consistent. For the first time all evening, Ivanka looked unsettled. She leaned closer to the microphone, her voice rising just slightly. Mr. Obama, that's ridiculous. Everyone knows, he interrupted her gently. Then there's no reason to be upset. A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the audience. Not mockery, recognition. Obama sat back, folding his hands calmly in front of him. If we're going to trade questions that challenge identity, he said, we should both be ready to answer them. Ivanka's jaw tightened. She wasn't used to being on defense, especially not like this. Especially not on a stage, under lights, with thousands watching and millions more at home. I think this conversation has gone off topic, she said, trying to steady her tone. Obama tilted his head slightly, almost sympathetically. "You're right," he said. "Maybe it has." He paused. "But before we bring it back, let me make one thing clear." He turned toward the audience now, his voice opening up, addressing not just Ivanka, but everyone. When people feel free to question anything about someone, their birth, their family, their very existence, just because they don't like them, he stopped. That's not leadership, a beat. That's weakness dressed up as courage. The words cut clean. The audience erupted. Applause surged through the hall, loud and unrestrained. Some people stood, others shook their heads in disbelief. The moderator glanced down at his cards again, pretending to look busy, but even he couldn't hide his awe. Obama raised a hand gently, signaling for calm. "I've dealt with this before," he continued. "I've seen how rumors spread, how they turn into weapons." His tone softened, not weaker but more deliberate. "But leadership isn't about throwing rumors back and forth, it's about rising above them." He turned back to Ivanka. "You said people want straight answers," he said. "They do. And they also want respect. You can't give them one without the other." Ivanka's face remained still, but her breathing quickened just enough for the cameras to catch it. The polished calm she had brought with her was being tested in real time. The moderator glanced between them again, unsure whether to intervene or step aside, and in that moment, watching Ivanka grapple with the weight of her own challenge. Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. If you were in Ivanka Trump's position, confident on a national stage, and suddenly faced with a question that turns the pressure back on you, how would you handle it? I read every single one of your comments, and moments like this reveal a lot about character. Ivanka opened her mouth to respond, but Obama wasn't finished. "You came here to challenge me," he said quietly. "That's fine. But if we're going to play that game," he added, "let's play it with facts." The crowd reacted instantly. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled furiously. This wasn't just a debate anymore. It was a reversal. "With all due respect," Ivanka said, tapping her microphone lightly, buying time, "that was below the belt." Obama shook his head slowly. "No," he replied. "What's below the belt is questioning someone's existence to win an argument." The line landed perfectly. Another wave of applause followed, louder, longer, almost deafening. Obama didn't speak over it. He didn't need to. He simply waited, composed, until the room settled again. Then he spoke softly. "Maybe next time," he said, "before we question someone else's story, we should make sure we're ready to have ours questioned too." Ivanka looked down for a brief moment, then back up. Her smile returned, but it was thin now, controlled. The confidence from earlier was gone, replaced by something closer to reflection. The audience could see it, the cameras could see it. Obama had done what few could. He had turned the challenge into a mirror, without raising his voice, without insults, without anger. The moderator finally found his words. "All right," he said awkwardly. "Let's move on to our next question on economic leadership." But no one was listening. All eyes were still on the two figures seated across from one another. The energy in the room had shifted completely. Ivanka had come to test him. Instead, she'd been tested herself. And what came next would determine whether she pushed back again or let the moment pass. The moderator's voice drifted into the background, barely registering. Charts, policy, prepared questions, none of it mattered anymore. The room had crossed an invisible line, the point where an event stops being a discussion and becomes something else entirely. Not entertainment, not debate, a lesson. Ivanka Trump sat motionless, her hands folded neatly, eyes fixed forward. From a distance, she still looked composed. Up close, the cameras caught the truth. Her jaw remained tight. Her smile appeared only when necessary, and even then, it vanished quickly. Across from her, Obama looked almost serene. Not triumphant, not smug, just settled. He adjusted slightly in his chair, then spoke again, not to dominate, but to clarify. "You know," he said calmly, "I've always believed that the louder someone talks, the less they're saying." A ripple of soft laughter moved through the audience, but it didn't break the tension. If anything, it sharpened it. People leaned forward. They didn't want humor. They wanted meaning. "Leadership," Obama continued, "isn't about winning arguments. It's about lifting conversations." He paused deliberately, letting the line land. Ivanka glanced toward the moderator, as if hoping he might step in. He didn't. Even he seemed caught in the gravity of the moment. "You came here tonight," Obama said, turning back to her, "to talk about the future, and I respect that." His tone wasn't condescending. It was measured, almost generous. "But when you reached for something as old and as false as that birth certificate story," he went on, "you reminded me how easy it is to drag the truth backward instead of pushing it forward." Several heads in the audience nodded, quietly, instinctively. Obama shifted his gaze away from Ivanka and toward the crowd. "We've all played political games," he said. "I've done it. The Trumps have done it. Every side has." A rare moment of shared acknowledgement. "But at some point," he continued, "you realize the game doesn't build the country. Truth does." The applause this time was different, not explosive, not emotional, respectful, thoughtful. This wasn't about sides anymore, it was about substance. Obama leaned forward slightly, voice steady, calm, but warm. "Politics has turned into a show," he said, "where everyone's trying to win the scene instead of fix the story." People shifted in their seats. "The real danger," he added, "isn't what's said on stage. It's what we stop hearing because of all the noise." The camera zoomed in. Even Ivanka, for all her composure, seemed caught between irritation and something else, recognition perhaps. "When your father questioned my birth," Obama said slowly, "I knew exactly what he was doing. He was building an image, strong, bold, unfiltered." He nodded once, acknowledging the truth of it. And it worked. A brief pause. But it also changed how people saw truth. It made lies feel normal, as long as they sounded confident. That line landed quietly but deeply. He turned back to Ivanka. "And now here we are," he said, repeating the same pattern. She opened her mouth to respond. Obama raised a hand, not abruptly, not dismissively, just enough to signal that he wasn't finished. "I'm not here to embarrass you," he said calmly. "I'm here to remind everyone watching, yourself included, that power means nothing if it isn't grounded in honesty." The hall went silent again. A single camera shutter clicked somewhere in the back. "We can have different beliefs," he continued. "We can argue about them. That's democracy. But when we start questioning each other's humanity, when we cast doubt on facts already proven, we stop being leaders and we start being performers." He paused. "The world doesn't need more performers. It needs adults in the room." The reaction came slowly. Then, all at once, people stood. Applause rolled through the hall, not frantic, not wild, but sustained, earned. Ivanka smiled politely, nodding as if to maintain composure, but the message was unmistakable. The challenge she had brought to the stage had been reframed into something far larger than she intended. Still, Obama wasn't finished. As the applause died down, his expression shifted again, less sharp now, more reflective. "I've met your father many times," he said. "We've disagreed on just about everything." A faint smile flickered across his face. "But behind the bravado, behind the sound bites, there's someone who understands the game better than most." He looked directly at Ivanka. "The difference," he said, "is that I chose not to let the game define me." His voice softened. "You're smart, you're strong, and you have a voice. But the real question is what you'll use it for. To echo old noise, or to create new understanding." The room froze. This wasn't confrontation anymore, it was guidance. Ivanka blinked slowly, her lips parted as if she might respond, but no words came. Obama leaned back once more, calm as ever. "I'm not here to win," he said quietly. "I'm here to remind people that leadership isn't about being right all the time. It's about being real." The applause that followed was thunderous. People stood, not cheering like fans, but clapping like witnesses to something meaningful. Even the moderator smiled, caught in the moment. "Mr. President," he said with a breathless laugh, "I think you may have just summarized what leadership really means tonight." Obama chuckled softly. "Maybe," he said, "or maybe we just remembered what it used to mean." Ivanka smiled faintly. Not the polished, practiced smile from earlier, but something smaller, quieter, almost reflective. She looked down at her notes, tapping them lightly, as if searching for something that could measure up. Nothing did. Obama had taken a moment of confrontation and turned it into a mirror, one that didn't accuse but revealed, and everyone in that hall knew it. This night had already changed. The applause softened, but the silence that followed carried more weight than any cheer. The stage lights felt gentler now, less confrontational, as if the room itself had exhaled. The intensity that once crackled through the air had settled into something quieter, thoughtful, almost reverent. This wasn't about scoring points anymore. It was about reckoning. Ivanka Trump sat still, her notes resting untouched in her lap. The confidence that had defined her entrance was no longer gone, but it had been reshaped, refined by pressure, tempered by consequence. She wasn't defeated, but she was no longer steering the moment. Obama noticed. He always did. He straightened slightly in his chair, the faintest hint of a smile crossing his face. Not triumph, not satisfaction, but calm resolve. When he spoke again, his voice carried a different texture now, less sharp, more grounded. "You know, he said, "when I walked onto this stage tonight, I thought we'd spend the evening talking about the future." He glanced around the room, letting his eyes rest briefly on the audience. "Education, the economy, the things that keep people awake at night." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. "But somehow," he continued, "we ended up right back in the past, questioning facts that were settled years ago." He paused. "Talking about what divides us instead of what might unite us." Several heads nodded. "And that," he said gently, "is the real problem with politics today." The room grew still again. "We've built a system where every disagreement becomes a battlefield," he went on, "where truth isn't something to be respected, it's something to be fought over." He turned his gaze toward Ivanka, not accusing, not confrontational. "I don't blame you," he said quietly. "You were raised in the middle of that world." That line shifted something. "You learn from someone who mastered the art of attention," Obama continued. "And attention can be powerful." A brief pause. "But attention," he said, "is not the same as respect." Ivanka's eyes flickered, just slightly. Obama continued, tone steady, almost soothing. "When leaders blur the line between ego and principle, people lose faith, not just in politics, but in each other." The room fell silent again, no movement, no whispers. "And that's why I'm saying this," he added, "not to insult, not to embarrass, but to remind. The country deserves better than personal jabs and ego wars. It deserves clarity. It deserves humility. And it deserves truth." A few people clapped quietly at first, hesitant, unsure if it was appropriate. But the sincerity in his voice spread, and soon the applause grew louder, fuller. Obama raised a hand slightly, asking for calm. "We've all said things we later rethink," he said. "That's human. But democracy gives us something rare, the chance to grow, to admit mistakes, to listen again." He turned toward the audience now, speaking directly to them, his voice slipping into that warm, reflective cadence people remembered. "I know times are tense," he said. "I know trust is hard to find. But every time we let lies become louder than truth, we give up a little more of what makes us strong." Faces across the room reflected something deeper now. Recognition, emotion, reflection. "The truth," Obama said, "isn't supposed to make you comfortable. It's supposed to make you think. It's supposed to make you honest. Especially," he added softly, "when it's hard." The pause that followed was long, intentional, commanding. And in that space, watching Ivanka sit with the weight of the moment, before we go deeper, I'd love to hear your point of view. Watching Ivanka Trump face a moment like this, where confidence meets consequence, what part of this exchange hit you the hardest? Share your thoughts in the comments. Stories like this reveal how leadership shows up when the pressure is real. Obama continued, "If there's one thing I want everyone here, and everyone watching at home, to remember," he said, "it's this. The measure of a leader isn't how loudly they speak, it's how much truth they can stand." The applause this time wasn't explosive. It was lasting. People stood slowly, clapping with quiet respect, not because they were told to, but because something had settled deep. Ivanka looked down, then back up. She wasn't angry now. She was thoughtful. Whatever she had expected walking into that event, this ending wasn't it. Obama turned to her, not gloating, not smug, just human. "You have influence," he said gently. "People listen when you speak. Use that power carefully, because every word we say builds something. A bridge or a wall. The choice," he said softly, "is ours." Ivanka nodded once. No rebuttal, no defense, just acknowledgement. The message had landed, and the room knew it. This wasn't about Obama winning. It was about the moment reminding everyone, on stage and beyond, what leadership is supposed to look like when the cameras are on and the pressure is unforgiving. The applause lingered longer than anyone expected. Not loud, not frantic, just steady. The kind of applause that doesn't rush to end because no one wants to be the first to break the spell. Ivanka Trump sat quietly, hands folded, her posture still precise. But something had changed. The armor she walked in with had softened. Not cracked, not shattered, just lowered. The cameras caught it in the smallest ways, the way she exhaled, the way her gaze no longer searched for the next opening. Across from her, Barack Obama remained still. He didn't soak in the applause. He didn't raise his hands. He didn't smile wider than necessary. He simply waited, letting the room settle on its own terms. That restraint, that refusal to dominate the moment, said as much as anything he'd spoken all night. The moderator finally stood, straightening his jacket, visibly aware that the evening had already reached its emotional peak. "Well," he said softly, almost reverently, "I think we've all witnessed something memorable tonight." A few light chuckles drifted through the room, easing the tension just enough to let people breathe again. Obama nodded politely. Ivanka offered a faint smile. The discussion moved forward. Technically, questions were asked, answers were given, topics shifted to economics, innovation, policy, but the room never fully returned to where it had been. Everyone knew it. What mattered had already happened. As the final minutes ticked down, Obama spoke once more, not as a debater, not as a challenger, but as a closer. In politics, he said calmly, and in life, truth doesn't need to be defended. He paused. It just needs to be lived. The simplicity of the line landed harder than anything else that night. No applause followed immediately, just silence. Then the room rose. Not all at once, but inevitably. People stood, clapping not out of excitement, but out of recognition. Journalists lowered their pens, cameras widened their shots. Even those who didn't agree with him couldn't deny what they had just witnessed. Obama stood, adjusted his suit jacket, and nodded toward the moderator. He turned to Ivanka and extended his hand. She stood as well. Their handshake this time felt different, shorter, quieter, but real. Ivanka smiled, still composed, still polished, but softer than before, less guarded, almost grateful. As Obama stepped away from the stage, the lights caught the edge of his profile. Calm, unbothered, reflective, the cameras followed him until he disappeared. Behind the curtain, for a moment, no one spoke. People simply sat there, replaying what they had witnessed. It wasn't the question that defined the night. It wasn't even the applause. It was the control, the way one sentence, measured, calm, unflinching, had dismantled an entire storm, not by humiliating, not by shouting, but by holding up a mirror. And as the audience slowly filed out of the hall, one truth lingered heavier than the rest. Leadership doesn't announce itself, it reveals itself under pressure. If you made it this far, thank you for staying with this story. Moments like this aren't just about politics or personalities, they're about character, composure, and what leadership looks like when the spotlight is unforgiving and the stakes are real. If this story made you think, reflect, or see leadership from a new angle, please take a moment to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to our channel, Celebrity Chronicles. Your engagement helps these stories travel further, and your perspective adds meaning to the conversation. What did this moment teach you about power, truth, or restraint? Whose response stayed with you the most? We read every comment. And we'll see you in the next story, right here on Celebrity Chronicles.